Hey everybody, welcome to Truth Be Told. Thanks very much for listening in. I appreciate your time. I want to start off today by saying that, contrary to how it seems based on how many of my videos are geared towards this, I hate making videos like this that are about or for or to atheistic thinkers. I never end up enjoying this process. And I find it has very limited success. I've had some success, meaning what I count as success is not the conversion of an atheist, but just the willingness to have good conversation, at least in the comments or if people reach out later. I do have some success there, but overall, it just kind of spirals into this really chaotic environment in the comments that I don't enjoy at all. While I love apologetics, that's true, I do love it, I'm not an apologetics expert by any means. I'm just a guy talking about things that he believes and thinks and sometimes has interesting thoughts. I'm not a professional, but I do put stuff out there. I put it up, it's public, people are free to comment on it. I'm not begrudging anybody. It doesn't go well. So if you think like, oh, well, he's just trying to get like cheap views or like good interaction in his videos or whatever, like that's nice, but honestly, it's so unenjoyable to me to just be like, I can't possibly keep up like 100 conversations with 100 different atheists that are commenting and have different angles and different thoughts and perspectives. But I do keep coming up with ideas that I want to share and I want to discuss. It's like I'll make one video and it has a pretty good response as far as like views and interaction goes. But it's just a flood of like naysaying and rebuttals that I don't have time to respond to all of. Some of it's just a little bit of name calling, but some of it's like really good points that I'm like, okay, like I want to dialogue with that, but there's so many of them that I'm like, I can't possibly go back and forth because it's not just going to be a simple like, oh, well, I meant this, or no, well, you're wrong because you made this logical fallacy. Then we go back and forth, over and over and over again. It never is just like one brief little correction or whatever. It's whole conversations that people are wanting. And while I appreciate that, I just don't have the time with the volume of comments and views that come in. But I do think about all these comments as they come in, and they kind of coalesce in my brain into like one hypothetical viewer. And I think about this stuff a lot, and I study into it and I read about it and I look up information regarding points that I've never heard before or seen before, and try and take stock of the merit of some of the arguments that I find very strong or very compelling from your side of the aisle. And as I do that, as I think about this stuff and study into this stuff, more ideas come to my brain that I want to share. I'm like, oh man, I wonder what they'd say to this, or I wonder what they'd think about this. And it's not in some big like gotcha moment, like, oh, now that I've taken time to distill their thoughts, I realize how dumb they are. No, it's not that at all. It's just your thoughts provoke thoughts in me. And I'm like, I wonder what they'd think. I wonder what they would say if I brought this up. And so that's what today's video is. So hopefully we'll be a little bit gracious in the comments. I know it can be very enticing to see a guy that's just one person making very clearly amateur videos or podcasts and be like, we're about to let this guy have it. I get it. I understand. But truly, I want to have dialogue. I want to have conversation to the best of my ability in the comments. I kind of always feel like, in Lord of the Rings when they go and they have that one fight at Helm's Deep and they're like waiting on the reinforcements to come without even knowing it. I sit there and I'm like, surely on the third day, like they'll come down the mountain with their whole herd of horses to just like wipe out. It doesn't ever happen. But I often think that like, surely I've got friends or people that think like I do in the comments. Look, people liked this video. They must, support or think like I do, but no one ever joins the comments because it is a stampede and it's a hard thing to combat. So, looking forward to the discussion. I hope that goes well, but I did want to share something that I had a thought about because I'm just curious about what you guys would reply to this. There's a phrase, and I know a lot of people have heard of it. If you haven't, it's probably the title of this video right now, or at least the thumbnail. But the phrase is that there are no atheists in foxholes. This calls back to World Wars I and II, or if you're Ilhan Omar, World War XI. I'm not sure if you guys saw that or not, but that's crazy. But this idea is these soldiers during these wars, and even in other wars, spent time in foxholes, these dug out holes where they would compete for territory. They'd hold their battle line and try and progress forward into enemy territory by digging other holes further and further in, and then finally take over enemy foxholes. And this was not a pleasant environment. People would freeze to death, they'd starve to death, they'd pop up every once in a while and shoot across the field of battle, hoping that the enemy wasn't advancing or standing right there, trying to advance themselves and throw grenades into each other's foxholes to clear them of enemy soldiers so that you could go climb in that foxhole and hold that as your battle line now at that point. And it was not a pleasant situation. It was high intensity, it was highly precarious, it was life or death. And in these moments where people were afraid, it was very common to engage in prayer of some sort. And I want to say prayer of some sort. I'm going to use higher power in just a minute because I'm not specifically talking about the Christian God here. If we get through this video and you're like, okay, yeah, maybe that was a good point, it doesn't mean you've come closer to accepting like the biblical God or the Christian God, or that God is this way or that way, he's all good, all knowing, whatever. Like, you don't have to hear what I'm saying here and affirm all of the tenets that Christians believe about God. This is just about belief in a higher power, which we're defining with the word God. Obviously, I'm a Christian. I come from that background. But, I want to be honest about where I'm proving or disproving or presenting evidence for the Christian God versus just a higher power, which typically with atheists, that's more the conversation we're having, is the higher power conversation. But in these highly precarious, scary moments where people are engaging in prayer, you are powerless. You've got no idea how to improve your chances of survival, and everything feels very much outside of your control, just a very chaotic environment. You had to be hyper vigilant and just kind of hope that every single thing goes well, that you don't put your foot on this place that then gets shot, or you don't climb out at exactly the wrong second where someone's aiming at your foxhole. You got to do all this stuff just to survive, and you can't predict any of it. You can't make a wiser or not wise decision. You can't just stay in your foxhole, they'll come for you, but you can't just pop out at any time, they'll shoot you. It's a very chaotic environment. But there is a finality to this circumstance, and it really like awakens something primal in you, I would imagine. But if you're an atheist in this situation, obviously you don't want to die any more than the Christian soldier in the foxhole next to you or with you. But this finality of circumstance, you're an atheist. You're thinking the natural world is chaotic and it's random, and we're always subject to these swirling events around us, and that's just reality, right? Death comes to everyone eventually, so no use pretending that it doesn't. You might not like it, but, the view is, well, I know nothing comes after. I'm not, really worried about the after. I just want my life to be preserved right now. But sometimes in foxholes, you even have this idea of like, I know I'm going to die and I don't want it to end, but I want whatever's next to be okay. There's this feeling of like, is there something next? And you almost kind of want to hedge your bets out of fear of what might be next, even though 10 minutes prior, before the danger showed up, you would have had no thought towards something being next at all. But you'd expect this to be the thought process of someone who is truly through and through an atheist, that everything just kind of happens, you have no control over it, all of life is chaos and death comes to everybody, so why pretend that, it doesn't? That should be the process of a person who is through and through, to the core of who they are, an atheist. But it does happen when people find themselves in foxhole situations that they reach out to something or someone in prayer. So my question today is, could this be some kind of evidence for God's existence? I realize it's not empirical, scientific, testable evidence necessarily, but personal evidence, at least of your potential belief in God, or where your lack of belief in God ends. Now, I also realize that in this circumstance, you're not acting calmly and that you're acting out of desperation, which in your view might skew the results. I realize this is not just your logical thinking kicking in, but it is something primal. It is something that is at a baseline, seemingly, of all people. And at the very least, Could it tell you something about what you may actually believe deep down that's being buried or hidden? And I ask this because it's a higher power that's being called out to in this circumstance. You don't cry out to dirt. You don't offer a prayer to a toaster. You know that those things exist, right? They are more real, and in being more real, they are more powerful than things that are not real. And yet, you equally know that they cannot help you. And your action then in these moments is to pray to a higher power. You show in this moment that you may not know God exists if you're to sit down and consider it intellectually, but you may actually trust in his ability to help you more than you trust in anything else in this moment, which necessitates a type of belief in his existence, doesn't it? And this is, maybe this is where you want to offer rebuttal. Maybe this is where you say, oh, he's not thinking clearly. Okay, share that in the comments for sure. But this makes sense to me. If you're reaching out to something, it is something that you have to believe exists. Otherwise, you wouldn't reach out to, or at least hope exists. And you have to believe that thing has the potential to actually help you, which we only know is true of real things. And, I kind of want to shift away from the foxhole, even though the foxhole thing is an analogy, but to use another analogy, like a meta analogy, if you will. I like analogies a lot. Some people hate them, but like from the top of a cliff, if we're staring down the edge of one, and I told you to jump off and grab one of the branches sticking out, you might look at the strength of that branch and be like, I don't know if that's strong enough to hold me. It looks kind of precarious. I don't know if it has like deep roots or not. And you might reason with yourself from the comfort of the top that it feels safer to just not jump off. Whether the branch will hold you or not in this moment is just purely academic. And you can comfortably say, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not holding onto that branch. That branch would never hold me. I believe wholeheartedly that branch wouldn't hold me. The existence of that branch being a safe thing to hold on to is not something I believe in, but it's all academic. Once you fall off the cliff, however, you're going to reach out for that branch. Whether you've made the intellectual decision before or not, you're going to reach out for the branch because you know that it's there. You know that it's real. You know there's a chance it could save you, and you kind of want that chance to prove successful. You have a hope that chance is successful. Now, again, I realize this is not empirical, scientific, testable, observable evidence for the existence of God. This is not a vial of his blood. This is not a face-to-face conversation with him. This is not the stars aligning to say, I am real, God. But I hear many atheists say, if God were real, why wouldn't he make himself more obvious to more people? Why has he not made himself obvious to me, for example? And I'd say, if a person who spends most of their time and most of their life hating on God and really training themselves to disbelieve his existence, if they can, in a moment of fear and doubt, turn to him as a last-ditch effort to save them from destruction, couldn't that be evidence that he has, in fact, placed an awareness of himself inside each of us? But that, potentially, you're burying that from the top of the cliff, right? All of us live in relative comfort and safety, especially here in America. Not so in many places, but, if you're commenting on this video, you've got access to internet, you've got a phone, you probably know where your next meal is coming from, or you wouldn't be watching this video. We've got a lot of privilege and blessing in this nation. And, from the top of the cliff, it could be easy to say, well, to trust in something like that feels scary. But once, your experience outweighs the scariness of trusting in something that you're not quite sure of, you're going to reach out for that thing. That's just what we see happening in human lives. So I just wonder about this, and I do want to offer one last caveat as well. I am not saying that to be a Christian, you must throw yourself in harm's way and then trust God to save you. The Bible's pretty clear about not doing this. Don't be an idiot. Even Jesus, Satan tempts him in the wilderness. He's like, throw yourself off this high place and God will protect you with a bunch of angels. And Jesus is like, no, this isn't how God works. Like, you don't just tempt him and test him and be like, how far are you going to go, God? Like, that's not how this works. You can test God. He says, taste and see that the Lord is good, or taste and know the Lord is good. He does want you to in some ways put him to the test because he offers you claims that he wants to prove. But it's not about just put yourself in harm's way or put yourself in a foxhole or throw yourself off a cliff and see if he protects you, and that will prove his existence. Don't do that. The Bible's very clear on we're not doing that. However, we do all go through periods of difficulty. We all find ourselves over the cliff at some point in life. We all find ourselves in foxhole situations, and we all have different thresholds of what puts us in a place where we let go of our stubbornness and trust in God. You might be very equipped to find yourself in a certain type of foxhole and remain resolute in not praying, whereas maybe it takes a lot less, and I'm like, man, I feel hopeless, powerless, this is the end for me. I'm just a little more like fatalistically mindseted, and maybe I pray or reach out to God quicker than you do, but at some point, we all have that threshold where it seems as if we will reach out. There are no atheists in foxholes, as the phrase goes. And honestly, this is genuinely the Christian position. The belief that through my sin, I am standing in a foxhole, looking up at the enemy about to throw a grenade on top of me, and I'm out of options. I have nothing left that can save me. I have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, no chance of saving myself or being saved from anyone else. And I cry out to God, and he saves me. This is the Christian story. But Christians have internalized this spiritual foxhole, whereas atheists have not. Though in physical foxholes, it does seem like, there are conversion moments. But we all start out, Christian or atheist, we all start out just as stubborn as the next person. It's not just atheists are out there being stubborn and they hate God and they don't want to believe in him. Christians can be just as prideful, just as desirous to think that we can do it ourselves, we can save ourselves, or that we must do it all ourselves, we must save ourselves. But we all come to these moments, these foxhole moments. And once we take stock of where we are, once we realize the hopelessness of our situation, it doesn't take much, it seems, for atheists or Christians to call out in desperation and hopeful trust to a God that a moment before they did not trust at all or did not trust to this degree. And that, to me, seems like evidence of something going on inside each of us that still is willing to say and willing to hope that God actually does exist.